News Talk 94.5, WPTI, 96.7 FM, WTOB. You're listening to The Wealth Guardians with Doug Ray, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. I am your host, Brice Payne, and along with me, Doug is off this week, so we've got Garrett Ray in his stead. And this week we are talking about controlling greed, fear, and other emotions when planning for retirement. So we've got a great first segment for you. In our second segment, we're talking about warning signs, how to spot problems in your financial life. Garrett, good morning.
Good morning, Brice. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I'd like to see a little bit better performance week in and week out from my teams. But Broncos struggling a little bit. I guess I can be happy for your alma mater, Wake Forest. At least they're hanging in there.
Yeah, we did pretty well against Florida State. Getting to the professional side of football a little bit. I have no idea what Matt Rule's doing down there in Charlotte. It's getting frustrating.
It is. It's getting frustrating in the Broncos world. Hey, my CU Buffaloes, they kicked out their head coach after only 28 games or so.
I saw that. Yeah.
So, it was 28 games. We had 4 wins out of that, something like that. Anyway, tough times, some of our alma maters. Anyway, before we get started on our topic today, controlling greed, fear, and other emotions when planning for retirement, Garrett and I want to do, of course, our Wealth Guardian service salute to everybody out there who has put on the uniform, or if one of your members, one of your family members has put on the uniform, or if they're a first responder. You are in our thoughts. You're in always our prayers here at the Wealth Guardians. Thank you for your service, and thank you for helping keep America safe. Garrett, you served in the Navy. Thank you for your service. And Doug, you're out there listening to this show somewhere. Thank you for your service as well. Garrett, lead us in here. What are we talking about in this first segment?
Yeah, Brice, in this line of business, we get to see, and it is a true pleasure, we get to meet all different types of people from all different walks of life. But we find that everybody going through a serious retirement planning stage of their life, there can be a lot of emotion tied into that. And we encounter quite a few different phases of emotion that people go through. One of the things that we run into from time to time, certainly not all the time, is someone who's just chasing those dollar signs. They still are really, really focused on aggressive returns in the market, and a little bit of greed can sometimes come out. Those are conversations that we obviously love to talk through with different people. But what's a good example of someone that you've seen, or a story that you have about when dollar signs get in the way a little bit?
Well, so that'd be greed, and you see that from time to time. You don't see it with every person who comes in, or every couple that comes in and sits down and wants a retirement plan. Some of them have more fear or joy, and we'll talk about those other ones. But greed doesn't happen all the time. But when it does, it's pretty obvious, and it can be a little frustrating. But one story that I keeps in my mind of greed is a couple came in, and they were in great shape to retire. They did not need to take a lot of risk anymore. Sometimes you have to take risk to try to shoot for the higher returns in order to be able to retire at a reasonable age.
That's great that you said like that. It depends what stage of life you're in as well.
Yes, what stage of life you're in, what your assets look like. This was a couple that did not need to take an enormous amount of risk at this stage. They pretty much done a good job of saving. But we had presented our plan to them, and the plan that we had put in place was a significantly lesser risk plan. When that happens, you're obviously not going to year in and year out get the market returns.
Right.
It's a less bumpy ride. It's a smoother ride, but it's not going to be. You're not going to be getting to the peak of that mountain as fast. Well, I remember this was in January of 2020. And your dad and I remember this very clearly. We presented the plan, and he said, well, guys, I really appreciate your time. I don't think I'm ready to make any moves now. I like your idea, but it's not the right time for me yet. I want to keep riding this Trump train as long as it's going. Again, January of 2020. Garrett, what happened a month after that?
Yeah, we got an interesting virus that came into the news cycle for almost 2 years thereafter.
And the market responded very quickly. Apple came out and said, we're not going to meet our quarterly sales goals here. A couple other companies came out and said, yeah, you know what, we're kind of in the same book that Apple is. And the market dropped. And the very first thing that your dad and I thought of, well, the very first thing we thought of was, thank goodness a vast majority of our clients who are in retirement are in a much safer portfolio than just being in the market, and they were not being affected nearly like what the market was dropping. And we thought the second thing we thought of was this couple. It's like, well, I guess that's when the Trump train pulled into the station. No, it did come back, but you know, that can show you the greed. Look, you don't need to chase returns. Let a financial professional tell you if you need to chase the returns.
And that was such a wild time in the markets too, because when we were in the thick of it, in March and April of 2020, no one predicted that V-shaped recovery that we got, that just complete rebound we got towards the end of the year.
Full disclosure, you can go back and listen to our podcast from that time. Your dad and I did not believe it was going to be a V-shaped recovery. Now, in our defense, the market was a V-shaped recovery.
Right.
The economy was not.
Oh, definitely.
Two different things.
Oh, definitely.
And if logic prevailed, the market would have followed the economy.
Yes.
It did not. It jumped right back up.
And we all know that there's a lot of string pulling by central banks and governments to get that type of recovery. So
yes. All right. So if you are just tuning in, you're listening to the Wealth Guardians, and Garrett and I are talking about controlling greed, fear, and other emotions when planning for retirement. So Garrett, the first one we talked about there was greed. I think we've got time for another one or two here. What's the next one on our list?
Yeah, so that's, you just talked about one example where people were definitely fearful, and that ties into our next one, fear. Talking about getting into the thick of coronavirus, there's lots of fear for various reasons going around. The market was no stranger to that at all. Now let's talk about fear when it comes to potential clients we may talk to.
So again, somebody will come to us and they've got a portfolio that might be heavily in the stock market. We're going to analyze their risk on their portfolio. We're going to analyze their risk tolerance. Usually, their risk tolerance is a lot lower than the risk in their portfolio, and there's a reason for that because they've gotten less risky over the years, but they've never adjusted their portfolio in and out as well. But recently, what we have seen, when I say recently, I mean the last year, year and a half, we've seen more and more people who are coming to us where they have, as a temporary move, moved a vast majority, if not all of their portfolio into cash because they're afraid. All right. Now, if you did that at the right time, if you did that at the beginning of the year, power to you. You made the right choice, right guess. If you've done that only in the last couple of months, you probably sold low or close to low, and that's not generally what you want to do. But we had a client who had gotten into, they called us up, and it was a client, wanted to move into cash. Now, this client happened to be in a program that moved into cash on its own algorithm to certain degrees on its own. So
one of our managed programs.
Right, one of our managed programs. He didn't need to second guess it, and I tried to talk him out of it. I said, you know, I'm happy to do whatever you want to do, but I don't know that that's the wisest thing. He said, yeah, I know, but I'm just scared right now. Okay, so there's fear. Yeah. Moved him into cash. He called back a couple of months later when on that, imagine a ski slope. That's the market going down. But there are moguls in that ski slope. Little bumps that'll turn around, and if you're just watching that bump, it'll look like the market's coming back up, when really it's just a mogul. And he called me back up and said, okay, now I'm ready to go back in. I see this market for the last couple of weeks having gone back up. I think we've hit the worst of it, and I don't want to miss up on going back up. Again, I said, you know, I don't think you should have moved into cash in the first place, and I'm happy to move you back into the program, but I think you're misreading this. I'm not a market watcher myself, but Garrett, you've got a lot of history in that, and your dad certainly has decades of doing that, and none of us believed that we have seen the bottom of this. This was a couple of months ago. And boy, do I feel for that client, because no sooner, the very next week after he had gotten back in, the market turned around and came back down. So now he was in all the more for the losses again. So that's an example of fear having you make the wrong decisions, and not logic and rationale.
Absolutely. And
speaking of fear, Garrett, we've got a seminar coming up here.
We do. It is our retirement success in turbulent times.
And this is the second time we've done this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's a great seminar. We love putting it on. It's something that is very popular. In fact, that's the whole reason we're doing a second offering of it. So.
Well, that and because of the times, what we're going through right now.
Absolutely.
Retirement success in turbulent times. And that's Thursday, October 13th. And we're doing it again on Tuesday, October 18th. And that's in Clemmons, North Carolina, part of the Triad at the Broyhill building. There's no cost to attend, but you do have to register. And if you would like to attend and see what our thoughts are on the specific market time that we are in and how we plan for our clients for times like this. You can register by either going to our website, thewealthguardians.com, and clicking on the events tab, or you can give Joy or Lynn a call at our office, 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409, and they will get you registered. Again, Retirement Success in Turbulent Times, Thursday, October 13th, and Tuesday, October 18th. And Garrett, we had a couple more to go through here, but we are running up against the clock on this first segment here, so I think we're going to get straight to the trivia question.
Yeah, I know what that means.
Here we go. Let's see if we can stump Garrett this week. Doug's not here. I know I would have stumped Doug on this one, but Garrett, I'm not so sure. Garrett, on October 5th, 1969, this British comedy troupe made its TV show debut on the BBC. The troupe members were Eric Idle, Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Michael Palin, Terry Gilliam, and Terry Jones. The question is, Garrett, who was this comedy troupe? And we will see if we stumped Garrett, and we'll see if we stumped you out there when we come back from the break. This is Brice Payne. With me is Garrett Ray. The show is The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And this is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. And this is 96.7 FM WTOB. News Talk 94.5 WPTI. 96.7 FM WTOB. You're listening to The Wealth Guardians with Doug Ray, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. I'm Brice Payne, along with not Doug Ray, but Garrett Ray in his stead this week as Doug is off. And in the first segment, we were talking about controlling your greed and your fear when making decisions in retirement. In this segment, we are going to be talking about warning signs, how to spot problems in your retirement financial life. Now, before we get started on that, and of course, I know the reason you stuck around, not just to hear Garrett and I talk, but you wanted to see if we stumped Garrett this week on the trivia question. And before we get to that question, I've got a question for you. Are you looking forward to retirement? All right, I presume you are. Do you want to confirm that you're making the best decisions for retirement? Well, I certainly hope you are. Well, then we here at the Wealth Guardians, Garrett, Doug, and myself, have great news for you. We offer a no-cost, no-obligation second review so you can see how to retire the job and keep the paycheck. Ball's in your court. You got to pick up the phone and call us, and that number is 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409. Again, no cost, no obligation, but if you've got a portfolio out there, you've got an advisor, or you've never sat down with an advisor, and you want to make sure that you're making the best decisions for retirement, that's how you can get in touch with us. We'd love to sit down with you and see how we can help you plan your retirement. Now, let's move on to the trivia question here. Garrett,
Alrighty.
On October 5th, 1969, this British comedy troupe made its TV show debut on the BBC. The troupe members were Eric Idle, Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Michael Palin, Terry Gilliam, and Terry Jones. Who was, Garrett, this comedy group?
You have definitely reached deep into the trivia bag this week. And British pop culture in the 60s and 70s is not my expertise. Is this the Monty Python guys? Oh, wow.
Look at that.
What a guess.
I mean, how many British comedy troupes can you name? That's,
Right.
that's really about it.
Yeah.
There's a few other ones, but from the 60s, that's the only one I could think of. But now I am a little bit older than you, Garrett, so I grew up watching MTV, and MTV reran the Flying Circus, Monty Python's Flying Circus, in and out during the early and mid 80s. So me and my best friends were always watching that. But some of the most timeless movies out there.
I've definitely seen the Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like
Holy
some
Grail.
Of the classics. Yeah.
The most quotable movie of all time,
Of course.
I think. And that, my liege, is how we know the world to be banana-shaped. So many quotes out there in that. Life of Brian, The Meaning of Life. My wife's favorite is The Meaning of Life.
Yep.
I'm big on that one, but Life of Brian and Holy Grail are just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
So you did it again. I don't think we would have gotten your dad on that one. I mean, I think your dad would have failed on that one. But Garrett, once again, whether it's history, whether it's engineering, military questions, or 1960s British pop culture,
There we go.
Garrett knows the answer. All right, Garrett, what are we talking about here in the second segment?
Yeah, speaking of a little banana shaped and how things can look a little screwy. how to spot problems in your financial life and some of the warning signs that we see when we see and talk to clients here in the office. And one of the ones that's interesting and we have to work a lot with certain clients on is people just have no idea what it costs to fund their lifestyle. And one of the things that we get, hey, what are your goals in retirement? Brice, Garrett, I just want to maintain our current lifestyle. We think we live simply, and then sometimes that can lead into further discussion. So what do you think about that one, Brice?
So when somebody sits down with us and they go through the planning process, we ask them to bring a lot of information. We want to see their tax statements. We want to see their Social Security options, their pension filing options. We want to see their statements on their 401ks and their IRAs and their non-qualified accounts. There's a lot of questions that we ask. And one of the questions that we ask is, what do you spend on a monthly basis? Or what do you expect to spend on a monthly basis in retirement?
Yes.
If any question is going to catch somebody like a deer in a headlight, it's that question.
Yes. Most frequent for sure.
Right. And what they know, I think what people know is, well, I don't know what we spend. I know that we have our paychecks come in and we put aside a certain amount every week or every paycheck into our investments, and we keep our checking account floating into a certain area.
Yep.
And then whatever's left over in 1, 2, or 3 months, we're going to spend it on something.
Yep.
Okay. That works okay while you're collecting a paycheck.
Absolutely.
But when your paychecks stop, you retired, and you're now on a fixed income, well, then you've got to have a fixed budget as well. And people don't know what they spend. And it's happened to us time and time again, Garrett, where someone will give us, well, yeah, we added up our budget, and when we calculate the water and the cell phones and the cable and the internet and whatever else, the property taxes, it comes out to be $1,500 a month.
And you and I will look at each other and just be like, let's revisit that one.
Let's revisit that one. Does that include groceries? Oh, I didn't know you wanted me to include groceries in that. Why wouldn't we have wanted you to include groceries?
Do you guys travel at all ever during the year?
What do you spend on gas? Oh, I didn't know you wanted me to spend, calculate gas. Yes, if your current lifestyle has you eating and has you driving, then we want to calculate that for retirement. So if you don't know what your monthly budget is, that is just financial responsibility 101. Sit down. I know it's painful. I know it is, because my stepfather, who's an engineer like you are, Garrett, he sat me down at a certain point when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and said, you need to start working on a budget. And he taught me how to do this. And a lot of people don't. Yeah,
and one of the things that we do run into is if people have a little bit of difficulty, we've got tools to help you out.
Yes.
And then my favorite part of it is when they go through that pain, they'll come back to us and be like, you know what, Brice, you know what, Doug, thank you for walking us through that exercise. Now we know. And just getting that little bit of education of what they truly are spending can open up a lot of eyes.
And whenever somebody goes back and revisits that and says, okay, we'll take this worksheet that you gave us and we'll figure out our budget. If they had told us, well, even when we calculate gas and food and whatnot, we think it's $3,000. Okay, well, that's a pretty round number. It'd be odd if it was just right at $3,000. So let's give you this worksheet. Invariably, it always comes back higher than what they thought it was.
Absolutely.
I can't remember the last time that somebody said, oh, we thought it was $3,000. It's only really $2,800. No, it's more than that.
Absolutely.
So that's a red light there if you don't have an idea of what you're spending or what your budget is or should be in retirement. That's one of the first things that you would need to accomplish. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Wealth Guardians, and Garrett and I are talking about warning signs, how to spot problems in your financial life. So, Garrett, we just talked about what it costs to fund your lifestyle. What's the next one?
Every now and then we'll get an individual or a couple who is just absolutely laser focused on, I have to attain a certain net worth or a certain balance in my account before I feel like either one, I can comfortably retire, or two, it's just a goal for them. I want to be $1 million man or woman. That may not necessarily be the case. We're going to have to walk you through the whole process, but you could potentially retire with much less than $1 million, depending on your lifestyle, and be completely fine.
So let's run through that scenario. Let's say somebody comes in and sits down with us, and we've had this recently where somebody wanted to have $1.5 million before he retired. That was his goal. Okay, it's good to have goals.
Yeah.
No problem there. But let's not be attached to that goal. And when we ran through all the analysis, he was right now at about 1 million. He wanted to work for about another 5 years to get to that 1.5 million. But he wasn't enjoying work. That's one of the questions that we ask. If when do you foresee yourself having to retire, and when would you like to retire? Two questions that we ask. Well, a lot of times people will say, well, I want to retire next year if I could, but I plan on retiring in 5 years. Well, if we can show you that you can retire in 1 year, wouldn't you want to know that now rather than 5 years from now?
Exactly.
And in this case, the gentleman didn't need to have anywhere close to 1.5. He had already saved up enough based on his spending. He didn't have a mortgage anymore. He was a very reasonable spender. He didn't have lofty goals or visions or legacy goals to leave for his kids or his church or whatever. He could retire right now. And it's better to know that now. So don't be fixated on a certain number. There's so many people out there who say, well, I've heard you have to have at least $1.5 million in order to retire. Absolute nonsense. There's so many other factors that depend on whether or not that number.
And I think that's the key point, Brice. Is we'll get folks out there who say, don't you have to have this amount saved up before you can safely retire? The answer is it's different for everyone. You have to do the work and go through the process. Everybody's scenario is different, but we can help guide you there. We
can help you. At least we can get you that answer. Right.
Absolutely.
Yep. Very good. So Garrett, we've got a seminar coming up here. We talked about it in the first segment. We're going to mention it here again in the second segment. This is the second time we're doing this seminar. It's Retirement Success in Turbulent Times. And we feel it's kind of poignant because, hey, this is not exactly the calmest market that we've ever been through.
We've seen a lot of turbulent times.
A lot of turbulence right now. I don't like turbulence when flying, and I know our clients don't like turbulence in the markets when they are in retirement. So we help them shy away from turbulent investments. But Retirement Success in Turbulent Times, it's Thursday, October 13th, and then again on Tuesday, October 18th. It's at 6:30 p.m. at the Broyhill in Clemens. There is no cost to attend the seminar, but you do have to register. And you register by giving us a call at 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409. You can also register by visiting our website, thewealthguardians.com, and clicking on the Events tab. All right, so Garrett, warning signs, how to spot problems in your financial life. We just talked about what your budget is or how much it costs you on a monthly basis to be in retirement. And then we talked about trying to attain, is it necessary to try to attain a certain nest egg size? What's the next one we're talking about?
Yeah, the other thing that kind of gets people fixated, I guess I would say, is our never-ending 24/7 news cycle. People come in with, either they're upset or sometimes they're very excited about certain world current events or political current events, and they think anxious, excited. We see the gamut, and they think that this is going to have a massive impact on their portfolio. That can be the case. Geopolitical things can impact the markets, but it certainly isn't the entire piece. What do you think about that?
Well, I got my start in this field, and your dad would be a better person to tell this story than I would, but I got my start in this field 10 years ago at T. Rowe Price, a little over 10 years ago. And I was sitting next to the people who'd been in the business for 10 years themselves, and one of the very first things I learned was that you're going to hear this time and time again. This is unprecedented times that we're in, and people will not want to be in the market, or they want to make changes to their portfolio because they're afraid of what they see going on.
Every year is the
world.
doomsday year.
Right. And I quickly learned that was true. I mean, no sooner had somebody told me, you're going to get a lot of calls like this, did I start getting a lot of calls like that. And it never stopped. I've been doing it ever since. In some form or another, I've been talking to people about their investments for the last 10 years and how to better align their portfolio. And inevitably, someone is going to say, I'm really concerned about the market because this is really unprecedented times. Whether it was 2010, 2011, and you can actually rewind and go back to that time period. What you pick a month and I'll pick the year. We can go back to that time period, and there is something in the news, globally speaking, that is unprecedented that has people concerned. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not concerned about what's going on in the world right now. There's certainly some strange things going on out there that are rightfully so, in the headlines.
Yep.
But there always is.
Yes.
And if you were to stay out of the market or not have your investments properly aligned because you're afraid of what's going on in the world at the given moment, you probably would never be in the market.
Right. It's the person who can never pull the trigger, never go to sleep at night, that type of thing.
Paralysis by analysis is another term for that. We see it time and time again. And Garrett, time and time again, we run out of time here on the show before we've gotten through our entire show.
I know.
But
Snuck up on us.
We'll see you again next week. Garrett, thank you for joining us. May all of your teams out there win this weekend.
Absolutely.
This is Brice Payne. With me is Garrett Ray. The show is The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And this is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. And this is 96.7 FM WTOB.